Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Just now we had a chat about how can we spice it up a little bit about blockchain, because I think blockchain is a very boring topic, as they say, because a lot of people talk about blockchain, but at the same time, a lot of people also don't know what blockchain is. Okay? So what I'm trying to do now is that based on my research, I'm trying to understand what blockchain is all about and actually what blockchain can do for hospitality industry. And please bear in mind though that this is a work in progress. I'm still also, like most of the people who are around talking about blockchain, a newbie you can call for blockchain, and I'm still learning as well about blockchain, just like the others. So why don't we learn together? So how many of you exactly know what blockchain is? Just out of my curiosity, what blockchain is all about? Okay, thank you. How many of you trade Bitcoins? The three of us, okay, fantastic. Then the three of us can talk later about Bitcoin, of course, but now when we talk about blockchain and what Bitcoin is actually, and maybe even some of you heard about Ethereum. Oh yeah, Ethereum. Anybody Ethereum then? More Ethereum than Bitcoin. Fantastic. Much better. Right. So when we talk about blockchain, what blockchain is actually? And then when we talk about blockchain, and not in terms of the cryptocurrency, we try to identify blockchain. I try to make it as simple as possible in defining blockchain as basically ledgers. So basically, almost literally blocks that they are connected to each other as ledger, that they make a bunch of information being bundled together. Okay? That's basically blockchain is. And sometimes I saw, for instance, a workshop teaching blockchain for dummy back in the Netherlands. They really use literally blocks, like Legos. I think it's a good idea to explain it, actually, but I just don't bring it now here with me. And what can actually blockchain do in terms of transactions? So I'm borrowing, if this works, at least. So what I'm borrowing a picture which is describing what blockchain is actually. So if you can see, it works from the left-hand side when somebody is trying to get some transactions. So somebody requests for transactions through a platform. So basically, by the time somebody is trying to make a transaction, they submit information to that. Okay? It's a peer-to-peer, as you can see. It is an open network of information, peer-to-peer, nobody in the middle. So we can just do our transaction directly with each other. Right. We call that nodes. We call that nodes of value. Since it is being peer-reviewed, what we can know from here is that it is very transparent, of course. Why? Because everyone within that network can see what is being added, what kind of information being added, what kind of information being transmitted, what kind of information being exchanged. Okay? So if you look at this bottom one, every time there is information, new information added, then there will be new blocks. Okay? Now, and of course the block will be verified. As I said, it will be verified within the network. And the transaction will be completed. And of course, the number of blocks will grow and grow and grow and so on and so forth. Now, this concept has been used by Bitcoin, by Ethereum, right? So what does it mean then? Because we know now, basically with blockchain, transparency is high. transparency is high. It is basically a ledger of value. That means then what we can use in terms of business applications, there are first part, what I call as the most feasible and already being done in the industry. Not only in hospitality, but we see already new payment systems. Using Bitcoin, using Ethereum, you can make transactions. You can pay using Bitcoin. Okay? It's media of exchange because it has value. The other application that is possible, especially with Ethereum, is the smart contracts. Why is it smart contracts? Because once you have updated what kind of contracts you are going to make, what kind of agreement that you have, it can also be traded within this blockchain. And since it is, again, transparent, it is being shared with all the involved parties, okay? It is smart because anytime you want, all the transactions can be traced back, whom did the transaction, who added the information, to whom it was. Identity management, also another part of blockchain is that it is traceable in terms of who did the information. It's related to the smart contracts, of course. And finally, it's also support the supply chain auditing. Now, what is interesting supply chain auditing? 2 weeks ago, there was a company. This company provided basically blockchain for farmers. So what they did is that the farmers who came up with the goods supplied it to other companies. It will be recorded as blockchain. Okay? And of course, the second party of this company, kind of a trader of the farmers, they supply to other companies further. Then the supply chain auditing here plays a role as to whom it finally being supplied. Now, put into the aspect of hospitality industry, we can think about for big hotel companies, for instance, for the big chain. When you have certain suppliers, the certified suppliers, and you want all your properties to use the same supplier, you can do the auditing easily by using blockchain. Because you know that all the suppliers are connected within this same network, and you can trace it back. Still using the same principle, the basic principle of blockchain mentioned just now. And I think this clicker needs some blockchain as well to work. Oh. But one of the most interesting application above all, at least in my view at the moment, is that it is connected to, oh, my bad. I pressed the wrong button. It's the Internet of Things. Now, this is the most interesting and most fascinating application actually, because when we think about Internet of Things, basically you have your devices connected to Internet already. And when you combine it with the new payment system, for instance, so you can combine two different applications in one. You can use blockchain to make payments also on proximity basis. But that's something that need to be explored further. Some examples, these are some companies who are dealing with, maybe you are among these companies. These are some companies who are developing blockchains and trying to provide their technology to the hospitality industry. To give you an example, for instance, blockchain is trying to provide a platform where people can book for rooms, for hotels, using blockchain. I'm not going to go into details about these examples. So based on this, what could be the opportunities? Are we really into the opportunities at the moment? Are we going to really, are we ready as hospitality for blockchain? Are we ready to have new currency using blockchain? Are we ready to eliminate the third parties? Bear in mind, because blockchain is basically peer-to-peer kind of system, meaning that the consequences could be for the third parties. Do we need OTAs, for instance, for making our reservation? Do we need even banks in financial industry? Maybe we don't need banks anymore because we can just make the transaction between us using blockchain currency. Loyalty programs, very interesting. Why? Because then you basically can collect the information of all your customers, of all your guests, and then you can use their information. You can use this information in blockchain by providing them with their loyalty points, which in the end, these loyalty points can be used as well for the transaction, for paying their accommodation. And finally, the transparency in supply chain, especially for big chain, they can trace all the suppliers being provided for the properties. I would like to end my information here, so feel free to ask some questions. Thank you.
So do we have any questions, any dying things that you want to know about blockchain? Now's your chance. No judgments. All right. Well, so let's have a quick chat. Let me get out from behind this beast. So one of the things that I think is important to remember, especially in hospitality, is that you can kill people, right? You're serving humans and they die. So in case you guys hadn't heard about Mexico and their bad liquor, so you have these people who are drinking bad alcohol and nearly dying in people's hotels. Blockchain, how could that help? Is there a chance for it to track bad liquor, bad food? Let's talk about supply chain, because I think that's a really critical piece.
That's very interesting, because the point of having this blockchain in supply chain is that by the time you as a company, for instance, as a hotel company, can register your suppliers, right? And these suppliers will be monitored as well. All the information, what they have delivered to the properties, when, and so on and so forth, all the information will be available. And you can easily trace it down, basically.
And you can't basically change it. I mean, that the immutable nature or the inability to actually change the information is key. And while some of the private blockchains, maybe they could be hacked, I mean, there's some of that we haven't experienced, but generally, no one would be able to hide who brought this bad liquor on site. So you'd very quickly be able to find out who did the bad thing.
Exactly, because you need to be validated. So all the information needs to be validated in here, and it is validated through the other peers, meaning that the other properties can also look into what has been ordered, for instance, by one of the hotels, one of the properties in Mexico City, by someone who is in LA, for instance, and vice versa.
And along with that also comes the contracts that you use to pay people, right? So let's talk a little bit, walk the audience through the smart contracts and how that might help people reduce fraud, get paid quicker, you know, some of the issues around settlement.
Yeah, with the smart contract, what they also do is that all the details you can put in the blockchain, all the details of the contracts, and meaning then that details can only be shared between the people who are involved in that as well.
And basically, you're getting paid as long as you deliver, right?
As long as you deliver in it.
And so for those who might ask, you know, who chooses when a smart contract has been fulfilled? You know, so how do I know that I'm going to get paid? Is it on the room stay, or if it's a vendor, what if we argue about whether the service has been delivered?
It is validated. So by the time you have received your products, the information needs to be added in the block as well. So everything, every transaction, every activities that is being recorded in the blocks needs to be added and
so you can be very specific, like, you know, you're going to give me 1,000 guests from your company, and when that's done, you get X dollars or whatever the currency is.
Yeah.
Excellent. So looking ahead, how many more minutes we got? We got plenty of time. So when when you're thinking about blockchain and travel, is there anything, so we have probably some people who work for big companies, small companies, startups. What are some of the ideas that maybe you're not seeing done that someone can steal maybe? Or is it just something that you're passionate about that you think that should be done with blockchain?
Well, the one thing I forgot to mention, by the way, because with blockchain you have two types of in terms of the openness of it. You have the public one and you have the private one. With the public one, of course, everybody can really see what's going on. With the private one, there will be some like controllers within it. So in terms of when it comes to the companies who are using blockchain for their smart contract, for instance, or for the supply chain, they need to be the controller. They are the ones who also validate all the transactions, but being also monitored by the other parties.
So is there a role for kind of a third-party moderator somehow, like some auditor of sorts, or is that something you're thinking we could see?
Yeah, the moderator is, but the moderator here is then from the same party instead of being outsider, just like authority. So the difference, of course, one might think, and one of the discussions is that, well, being the moderator, then you are sort of authority as well. And we heard nowadays that the authorities, the central bankers, for instance, they would like to, to start regulating Bitcoin. Whilst that's not the purpose of Bitcoin. Why? Because with Bitcoin, it's basically you reduce the third party's role and also this control from authority. So, but when you use it as the private one, you are the owner of this chain anyhow. So it is fine to be the controller of your own values, right?
Yeah, and I think that's an important distinction if you didn't quite catch that. There's the public version of a blockchain, which is something that everyone can see and add to and they understand and it's agreed to. And then there's a private blockchain, which is the same concept as having the same information shared among parties, but it's not publicly available. So that's something that's just really important to remember. It doesn't have to be public for your company, so you can still use blockchain in a private fashion, right?
Yeah.
When it comes to settlement and making sure that payments, because Bitcoin is used to be used to buy things, like at my restaurant. Now it's a little unstable, it takes too long, and it's very volatile. So if I'm thinking about cryptocurrency for payments for my hotel, like if I want to be a hotel that takes a different type of cryptocurrency, is that happening? And if so, how do they do it?
It's not happening yet at the moment, at least not that I know that any hotel is adopting cryptocurrency at the moment. But I think the only way, if they would like to adopt cryptocurrency, is to make their own currency instead of using, for instance, Bitcoin. Why? Because with Bitcoin, then you have the fluctuation of the value of the price. Whilst if they come up with their own currency, can only be traded within the same chain, it might be more stable and it might be more useful for themselves.
And so that's loyalty points too come clearly into play. So a lot of companies have realized that holding loyalty points on their balance sheet is a liability because it's money that technically they're going to have to pay. So it causes accountants a lot of headaches. Yeah. But one potential would be to make a currency for your hotel group and use it as loyalty points. So instead of earning just a point, you would have a branded Hilton point or whatever you wanted to call it, and then you could earn currency in that way, right?
Right, and the interesting part of it is, of course, it might be more attractive for your guests. Why? Because you can exchange your points, your loyalty points, in terms of cryptocurrency with the other guests, with the other members.
Oh, that's interesting. So maybe if you didn't have enough, you could. It doesn't have to be one-to-one. You could just put an auction up or something like that, right? And you do see a lot of airlines now making these stores where you can, spend way too many points on something that's not worth much money, at the mall or you're at the airport and they try to sell it, So I think there's a lot of interesting things that hotels could do too, as far as buying food on site or getting alcohol, things like that you might do through your points as well. One last question. So. Big question, so it should take a minute, but distribution is always an issue. We love talking about distribution because it's how we all book hotels, make money. How does this change the distribution landscape? Are you just adding more channels? So the startups that you pointed to, are we just getting now 3 more OTAs or 3 more things we have to deal with? Walk us through the process. Is this just going to make our lives harder?
I think that's the 1 million question, isn't it? Because the biggest question that we have is what would happen with the OTAs because of this? Are OTAs still be having their role in this? Whilst we know that with blockchain, we can basically let the users, let the guests, well, contact the hotels directly, and especially combining with this loyalty program or cryptocurrency that they come up with, then the role of OTA might not be relevant anymore.
And there might have to be some more collaboration. Oh no. So, yes, question. I'm going to give you the microphone though, so.
Hi, good morning. My name is Sarah Duwag. I'm a journalist for Hospitality Insight based in Germany. I have two questions for you, Dr. Lim. First one, across your research, along your research, did you get to know if any hotel chain is already busy working on blockchain? And my second question would be regarding the disruptors from yesterday, which are Airbnb and giant OTAs. Do you believe blockchain could be disrupting those disruptors?
Very good question. Thank you, Sarah. To answer the first question, I've only heard some. This is still unofficial, but I've heard that some hotel chains are looking into blockchain. To what extent they are, I have no idea, to be honest. But I've heard that, of course, there are some big players looking into it, which I think, of course, it's wise because otherwise they might be left behind. The other question about how disruptive this blockchain is for the current disruptors, like OTAs and Airbnb, for instance, it is related to the role of eliminating the third parties. It might be disruptive indeed for those OTA, for those third parties, that blockchain provide the possibilities for the peer-to-peer transactions or peer-to-peer connection without them, eliminating their role in that. So it can be indeed very disruptive.
I don't think they're just going to sit and watch, right? They are like on top of technology and innovation, and they also have like a huge financial backup, so I guess they're going to be on top of it. Don't you think so?
Yes, I do think so, of course. I don't think that they will they will do nothing. But what they are going to come up with, that's something that we don't know yet.
Or how fast, right? I mean, one of the issues is we have the ideas, and we've been talking about blockchain for I guess 2 years now. It's been really, really buzzy. This is the biggest year, but how fast are we going to move? And sometimes you can move too fast too, because maybe blockchain is total crap. Maybe it just doesn't matter. But likely it's not likely that that's the case, but we don't know.
Well, in a way, it is indeed kind of a race because everybody's trying to see what they can do with blockchain. Every industry is doing that. In the Netherlands, we have Dutch Blockchain Coalition, where we're looking into different industries. One of them is, of course, now hospitality industry, to see what kind of impact that would have. And it is being seen by different parties within, from different industries as well, being co-financed by the ministry in the Netherlands, Ministry of Economics. So there are some movements over there.
And then also, we should mention, which I haven't, is the known traveler digital identity that Accenture and Marriott are working on. And that's related to global movements of people and making a shared identity. So for the blockchain, you'll be able to control your data more with the governments, theoretically. And you'll be able to submit the data you need for your visas. And Marriott believes that this is a really important thing because the more people that travel, the more money everyone makes. And so if we're all sitting in line for 3 hours because we want to cross a border, especially given all the politics of today, that's a problem. And so Marriott has actually realized that they can fix identity, which is completely opposite. You wouldn't think that that's what they would be doing, but they're investing money in it. And yes, the idea is that eventually you can walk up to a door and it just opens because it's your face, and they have all that information and they know where you're at. So I think that's my most exciting, I think, about the blockchain is that maybe passports become redundant. And they told me this recently, I didn't know this, and I guess it makes sense, but there are people's jobs in each government of ours that fly around the world to embassies with a little satchel of visa stamps. And they just do that all day long. Their entire year, they fly around to give visa stamps to their embassies in order to put them in passports. And so you think about all of the things that go into that, it could really change governments, be cheaper, we'd have less problems, and it'd be more secure, so maybe that would help some of our politicians calm down a little bit.
Though I have to say, it is indeed interesting. One of the key themes at the Dutch Blockchain Coalition is identity management. Why? Because they said, well, we would like to know whoever behind it, and we really want to have people basically accountable before we can even let them use it. So that's why they say, well, let's put a basis first, which is identity management.
And anybody who's ever lost a passport before will know how insanely challenging and sad it is when you realize you're stuck someplace because of a piece of paper. And so I think that things will change pretty quickly once that happens. So, any other questions to close us out? All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Lim. Appreciate it.
Thank you for your time.